There we go.
Record now. So we're going to turn over to Reverend Kate for a little bit of a context setting. And then I'll come back and talk a bit about what we did in Gospel.
So the opening question, why are we doing this? And I think within that, there's many directions we could take, but one that really needs to be addressed, given that we are part of the New Hampshire Council of Churches, is why are we doing this? And I want to speak to this particularly from a Christian perspective, since that is my tradition, but of course, there will be many crossovers between the, UU 7 principles, Jewish mitzvot. So whatever tradition you are bringing, I imagine that this will speak into your experience as well. So why are we doing this? Because it is a sacred call. We are called to act justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with our God. Which is an important note from Micah 6:8, because frequently, when I have engaged in conversations about justice, conversations that are in any way seen as sort of controversial, I get the response that I imagine some of you have gotten as well. Never at a church in New Hampshire. But why do you have to make it political? Why can't you just talk about Jesus? My siblings in Christ. I don't know if you are familiar with the Bible, but there are passage after passage reminding us that it's not just what you believe, it's how you apply that belief to the way that you exist in your own life, the way you exist in your community, the way that you exist in the world. We are called to this work. And this work feels particularly urgent. More so every day, it feels like. I think perhaps at other times in our collective public life together, we could say, well, perhaps these conversations would be better had in schools or in government or any number of other institutions. But either because they cannot or because they will not, these conversations are not happening the way that they need to. And the church can be that place where members of community can gather across difference to really be bold and brave and figure out how to be neighbors to one another. So, secondly, how do we do this work? Part of our tradition as Christians is finding common ground. Galatians says, you are all one in Jesus Christ. We are called to love our neighbors as ourselves. Yes, that includes the neighbors that we don't like, even the ones that we disagree with. We are all made in the image of God. We all have that inherent dignity and are worthy of love and respect. And sometimes I have interactions with my neighbors that make me want to scream into a pillow. And then afterwards, I have to remind myself that they are made in the image of God and they are beloved, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But we all have more in common than we don't. We all have more in common than we don't. We all want for our families to be safe and housed. We all want to have enough money to pay our bills. We all want our kids and grandkids to inherit a better world than the one that we found. So when we are having these conversations, part of our theological imperative is, can we start from a place of common story? Can we start from a place of shared values? Can we start from a place of common vision? We are asked to listen empathetically, to be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. Boy, howdy. Because we live in a culture that rewards certainty and punishes doubt. We live in a rapid fire culture where the goal is always to sort of have the answer. But what would it look like to go into a conversation and really listen? Not just wait for your turn to speak, not just like be waiting for that moment when the absolute zinger that you have been practicing in the mirror and maybe thought of at 2 a.m, you're finally ready, it's going to happen. What would it look like to really listen? To listen to their words, and equally as important, listen to the truth that is behind their words. Because there's what we say and there's what we mean. And in listening, you don't have to change your mind. You don't have to change your mind. You don't have to agree with what they're telling you, but you do have to listen. That is part of our call as people of faith. And that is how we have respectful dialogue. We're called to speak the truth in love, according to Paul's letter to the Ephesians. It sounds basic. If you've been involved in any sort of conversation around conflict, who has heard of I statements? We're called to speak the truth in love. That means we still speak our truth. We are not being asked to water our truth down. There is absolutely nothing that is more powerful than your own story. But it is slightly reorienting our approach so that the goal of this interaction is not to win an argument, but to witness yourself to the transformative power of love and justice in your own life, and to invite that reflection in others. Because when one person wins a conversation and the other person loses, what happens to the loser? Resentment. Yeah. Resentment, it is the end of conversation. There is no further conversation when you feel like the loser of an interaction. And this approach, for those of you who belong to faith communities that use the Revised Common Lectionary, this past Sunday, we heard the gospel reading of Jesus meeting the Samaritan woman at the well. Samaritans and Jews, Jesus' people, and the woman he encountered at the well, they are longtime enemies. But you wouldn't really get that from the interaction that Jesus has with her at the well. He is both speaking the truth and sort of challenging her perspective, but also fully celebrating and seeing her dignity as a human being. So much so that she wants to actually tell other people about this interaction. So it is sort of in this fourfold tradition of courageous conversations are not just sort of a addendum to the gospel, they are the gospel. They are our sacred call. And as part of that, we need to find common ground. As people of faith, particularly in the Christian tradition, we have this sacred story. How can we approach this from a place of we are in this work together? And to do that, we need to listen empathetically, not just waiting to speak, but really witnessing to the image of God in another person. We need to bring our full truth in respectful dialogue, but also be open to the full truth in others. So this is sort of the bird's eye view of this work through the lens of Scripture. And James is going to give us okay, what is this? Like, all of these concepts are nice. All of it is like, well, I like common ground and empathetic listening and respectful dialogue. All of those sound cool, I guess. Like that is a nice ideal, but like how? How do we do that? So James is going to give us an example of the approach taken in Goffstown that I think is so powerful and really can witness to us how these conversations can be shaped and informed today.
Great. Thank you. So some of you know I do a 90-minute workshop on how to have difficult conversations. Many of the base concepts that I use in that 90-minute workshop, Reverend Kate just wrapped up in what, 10 minutes?
I try.
Beautifully done, thank you. So. Works, I get to click this the right way. There we go. So in Goffstown, what we did in 2019, I came up with this bright idea that it was time to have some conversations about race in Goffstown. And so I got together with my good friend Diane Hathaway, who was she just retired as the director of the library in Goffstown, and said, you know, what can we do with the community to have some conversations? So we hatched this plan to work with St. Anselm College, which is right in our backyard, Crispin's House, which is a local youth organization that works with youth in the Goffstown schools, and the Granite State Organizing Project, who brought those groups together. And we created this program that was, let me see if I can get somebody's talking. Whoever is talking, can you, and I'll see if I can get you to mute. Let's see if we can mute everyone. All right, let's see. I think I got it. Okay. So we hatched this plan to create a series of conversations, not just one conversation, but a series of conversations. And those conversations would be centered around some books, which you see up on the screen. So, and I'll talk a bit more about each of these books and how they played into the conversations as we go along. So what we ended up doing is saying we wanted to make sure that we had everyone understand the importance of having local conversations around across difference, local community-based conversations, because we hear all the time when we need to have national conversation or a state conversation. What about a very, very hyper-local conversation? So that was one of the objectives we had. We also wanted to bring about this notion that we're all in this together. We cannot do this alone. We have to partner, right? So that was a notion that we wanted to bring in. We wanted to bring people's understanding of how to put conversations like this together, because we were facilitating these conversations, but we knew that more conversations needed to happen than the 5 of us who were part of the committee could do ourselves. We needed everyone to be having these conversations. And that's why we're saying to you, we need you all to have the conversations, to drive conversations in your local communities. And we also wanted to build a practice of a community of practitioners. Practitioners. So that's part of what we're trying to do here, build you all as practitioners of facilitating courageous conversations. So the agenda for what I'm going to talk about is this. We'll start with what was the need? How do we kind of launch into this? What was the program we did, the 13 conversations over a 3-month period? I'll talk about what the program was. I'll talk a bit about the timeline, what it took to plan this, and then how it got rolled out from an execution standpoint. I'll touch on a little bit how it was managed, not a lot. I'll talk about the results. What did we find were the results of our 13 efforts in 3 months? And then I want to talk about what we learned from this whole set of conversations. And then next steps, and that's when we'll really open it up to Q&A. And you know, I'm a firm believer of making sure people are engaged. So if you have questions as we go along, feel free, because that's what we're here for.
And there will also be time at the end.
And there should be time at the end for questions too. So one of the things we started off with was, oh, you're not gonna be able to see it because it's a TV. This image, anybody know what this image is?
Map of Goffstown?
No? What?
Redline?
Redlining. It is a map of Manchester from the 1940s that was the official redlining map. And everybody knows what redlining is, right? Right? So the places where people of color could not be sold property were not desired to live. And what you see, if you know Manchester, this gray line here is the Merrimack River that goes right through the center of town. And the red areas are the areas that were, of course, where people of color couldn't live. And if you look at that map, what you notice even today, the places that are not so well developed that you sort of don't go into are the places in red. Which shows the lasting impact of those policies and best practices from the 1940s and before. And if you ever want to know how this happened, not just in Manchester, but all across the country, there's a book called The Color of Law by Richard Rothstein that I highly recommend that you read. Okay, so what was and still is the need? We noticed a number of people in the community were feeling really stressed and frustrated. And I had requests from people in the community, and Diane at the library had requests from people in the community to try to help with the stress. And part of that stress was being caused by different events that were happening around town and around the state. So does anybody know what this flag is?
Yeah.
What is it? More than that. What is it?
Battle flag.
Oh, battle flag, but more than that. What is it?
Nationalism.
Nope.
From the south, here in the north.
Well, it is a Confederate flag, but there's more to it than that.
Where is it?
Nope. Notice the holes in that flag? Those are burn marks.
Oh.
This flag was found in the mailbox of an African-American family in Goffstown, New Hampshire in 2019. This was one of the events that kind of triggered us having these conversations. Some of you may recall on the lawns of some families in Hockington, Goffstown, Manchester, Hooksett, a number of towns, some white supremacists left a little bag that had a note in it with some rocks that had some white supremacist slogans on it. That was upsetting a number of people. Portsmouth, some of you may recognize the swastikas that were written on the bridge in Portsmouth. That was creating some consternation as well. So a number of things were happening in Goffstown and in the state that were, and I just named a few, those towns that were listed, there were some other events that were happening at that time as well, that created what we saw was the need and for us to really start to have these conversations to address these issues. Right. So what was the program? In 2005 at the Episcopal General Convention, and in 2015 at the General Convention, we passed resolutions about addressing racial reconciliation at the national church level. 2015, I was actually at the convention, and that resolution came from the committee that I chaired. So one of my big things is we need to live into the resolutions that we pass. And we shouldn't just make a position statement and then say, okay, that's great, we'll go on our way.
We did it.
Yeah, we did it. We passed the resolution. Yeah, which, by the way, is quite a feat. So there is a little bit of celebration that goes on. But we have to live into it every single day. Right? And even in New Hampshire, we passed some resolutions at the diocesan level around racial reconciliation that we really want to make sure we live into. So this program was kind of this program was one way to live into those resolutions. And we did it by having book reads, lectures, exhibits, all that were accessible in terms of registration for the events from a website that was hosted by the library. So as you can probably tell, the library was key in this whole effort. So I would encourage you to make contact with your library and ask if there's a possibility for the library to help host some courageous conversations. So here's a snapshot of the program. We did it using, in 2019, the Episcopal Church launched what we call Becoming Beloved Community Long-Term Commitment, which had 4 components to it. Telling the truth about who we are and how we got here. Proclaiming the dream of who we could be and who we'd like to be. Practicing the way of love. And repairing the breach. The breach of the relationships between races that have come out over this last 400 years. So those are the 4 components of the Becoming Beloved Community long-term commitment. So I took those and said, let's build events around those 4 areas to help people actually experience those 4 areas. And there's a picture that I'll show you in a minute, but it's those 4 areas are shown on a labyrinth, which means you don't necessarily go cyclically from one to the other around the circle, but you go in one, you might come out another, you might even go back to one as you learn about yourself and about your community. Because telling the truth may spur some action you want to take in practicing the way of love. So you do that. You don't have to proclaim the dream first, right? So understanding what these 4 components are, I said, let's put some events together that help us to have conversations around these 4 areas. So, and we have to put a pamphlet, it's been so long now, we've run out of pamphlets, or I would have brought some of the pamphlets that showed these. But events like we had book discussion. So I also chose 4 books and 1 document to be the basis for some of these conversations. One book was Waking Up White by Debbie Irving. And in fact, the kickoff event for this whole program was we had Debbie Irving come and speak at St. Anselm College. We had 300 or so people in the St. Anselm Dana Center for that event. And she goes around and speaks on the topic, and she spoke to the community. The next morning, I arranged for her to remain, and she actually is just from Winchester, Massachusetts. So she's close by, but we had a great time. And I'll show you some pictures in a few minutes of that event. But the next morning, she led a conversation with the town leadership. Because what we find is leaders never have the time to learn themselves. When they're out with the public, they have to look like they know all the answers, and they can't know all the answers because they've never had the conversations and experienced themselves. So we had Debbie facilitate them through a conversation to help them to understand the topics better, and with themselves, with the leadership, figure out, so what are we going to do in the town to make the town better? Yes.
I'm not so familiar with Debbie Irving. Can you tell us a little bit about her?
So
She wrote this book.
She wrote this book, Waking Up White, which goes through her experience as a white person growing up in Winchester, Massachusetts, very ritzy town, and her awakening, her waking up about being what it is about being white. Right? So she tells her story in the book, which helps people because it's one thing for me, a Black person, to come up and say, here's what my experience is. But it's another for a white person to get up and say, here's what my experience is. Her telling the story about what she went through will make a lot more sense to you than my telling you my story about what I went through. Right? So we wanted to start off with her because the challenge is, and there's a saying we use in the racial reconciliation world, white people created the problem, white people have to solve it. Now, what's challenging is what we hear sometimes is, well, we need to let Black people lead this problem, lead this resolution of this problem. And I disagree with that. Black people can say what the problem is, but we don't control the levers of power. White people do. White people have to be the ones to actually solve the problem. In consort with us Black people, there's a saying in the disability space, which has triggered over too, nothing about us without us. Right? So really what that means is we all have to work together to find the solution, not just any one race or group. Right? And that's part also of what we tried to get across in Debbie's conversations. We tackled race in art from an artist who puts on a show called Culturally Curious. And she showed a number of videos and paintings and talked about how race has been portrayed through art through the ages. Right? So that was another conversation that we had. We had her do the presentation, and then there was a conversation around it. So that was about the telling the truth about who we are and how we got here. And then we talked about proclaiming the dream. And then there's this great book by Joseph Barnes called Understanding and Transforming Racism, and Undoing Racism. So that was a book read for another series of conversations that we facilitated with some recommended readings of Dr. King's I Had a Dream speech, which we actually played at our conversation about the book and proclaiming the dream. Right? And I'm going to actually share with you, I'm going to go through one of the conversations that we actually, so you get a real feel for what it actually is like. We had Abby Hutchinson come in and lead us in some historical songs, Sweet Freedom songs. We actually used, so the other partner here was the schools. We had some of the conversations in Goffstown High School in the media library. So I would recommend seeing if you can get the schools involved as well. Now there's a whole challenge with that going on because of what's going on. Where are we? Right across the street. In fact, I was right across the street just yesterday morning testifying against House Bill 1792, which is trying to, once again, make it so that teaching about diversity and about the protected classes is not allowed in schools. Back again.
Like they don't have any hobbies.
Like they don't have any hobbies. And this is after the second lawsuit against bills. And I was actually a party to the second lawsuit. We just got the injunction from Judge McCafferty a few months ago, and she just made that injunction permanent last week. So, but get the schools involved too. Talk to the superintendent, the principal of the high school, principal of the middle school, whatever. See if you can use their facilities. See if you can use as a media library, a media room or a library or someplace that the community can gather. And it's good for them too. Why? Because it brings people from the community into the school. Right? And that's so needed in these schools today. We also had an Ask a Muslim Anything with Robert Aziz. He came in and talked about what it's like to be a Muslim. And then people got to ask him questions. So I had a conversation about it. For the Practicing the Way of Love, the book that we used was Resmaa Menacem's My Grandmother's Hands. And he talks about white bodies, black bodies, and blue bodies, and how the trauma of racism manifests in our bodies. It actually causes physical harm. And sometimes we don't know it. And it makes us act in ways that we would not ourselves think we would act. So that's part of understanding who we are and how we act. We had conversation about that. We looked at a documentary called Colorblind, Rethinking Race. We did that at the Parks and Rec Center. So the Parks and Rec Center in your community may be a place to have some of these conversations as well, right? And then I facilitated how will we grow community conversation again at the high school media library. How will we grow out of what we've learned? How will we take understanding better who we are from the telling the truth? How will we take proclaiming the dream? Where do we want to go as a community? Because the conversation was, how do we deal with this in our community? What do we want our community to look like? And then how do we start living into that, right? And then for the repairing the breach, the book was The Color of Law that I mentioned earlier from Richard Rothstein. Along with, just a few months earlier, the governor's commission on diversity had released a report on the state of diversity in the state of New Hampshire. So we assigned that as one of the pieces of reading that we then had another actual conversation around at the high school. Along with that, we had, you all heard of the Human Library before? You should try to get your libraries. Yeah, you got one. You did one, right? So this is where people are the books. So there's an afternoon where people volunteer to be the books, and other people from the community will come in and take out that book for 15 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever the program length is. So people get to know each other on a one-on-one basis. So the librarians try to identify people who would be books, who are interesting people, different people to be the books. So another opportunity for one-on-one conversations where you might not run into this kind of person in town or any place because they're not part of your circle. Check with your library and see if they might be willing to do a human library.
So these were local people?
These were local people, people in the community.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So that's the overall program. And I've got some pictures that I'll talk a bit more, but I want to just break from it and see how this is settling on you. How does it feel? Are there any questions that come up? Yes.
I was wondering, are all the same people involved in all 13 presentations and conversations, or were there a variety of people in and out of the programs?
There were a variety of people in and out of the program. Yeah. And a lot of publicity. I mean, I'll talk about in a minute, how we planned it, what we did for the planning and how we rolled it out. But yeah, the various people came in and out throughout the program. Yes.
Did you find that like-minded people tended to participate in these programs?
Yes.
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 That's the dilemma. How do we then bring the people who are burning the flags and throwing the rocks? How do we?
So that is a huge challenge. And my suggestion is if you can get somebody from that other side, if you will, on the planning committee. Have them help actually plan it. That way they have the ownership. There are people that they can reach out to that you couldn't reach out to. Yeah, there was another question.
Can I also answer that question briefly as well?
Yeah, sure. Okay.
Even if you can't get someone from a particularly difficult perspective to join in the conversation, there is also something to be said for, as a community, getting a group of people together who say, anti-racism is something that we value, because it means that those who sort of do evil without feeling like anyone is going to check them on it, to see that their neighbors have gathered with a strong response can be a deterrent.
Yeah. And we call this anti-racism. It's a little story. 2012, there was a meeting of the Anti-Racism Committee of the Episcopal Church. And I had not been involved when I was growing up. My parents were civil rights activists, but I said, I don't ever want to do civil rights activism. So I hadn't been to any meetings. Reverend Bill Exner, who some of you know, was our rector for 31 years. He asked me, would you please go to this anti-racism meeting for the diocese just to tell me, go and tell me what they say. So I go and I sit and I listen and I say a few words, but nothing big. 2 weeks later, I get a call from Bishop Gene Robinson, who asks me, would you chair the anti-racism committee?
Can't see.
How do you say no to your bishop? So I said, okay, I will do so on one condition, that we can change the name to the diversity committee. Because I don't want to be associated with anti or contra. I want to be associated with what we're for. So I hesitate whenever I hear the term anti-racism. I more call, the Episcopal Church language is really racial reconciliation. How do we reconcile the brokenness that we have in our community around race? That I find helps with finding the people who would not normally be involved in this. Because when you say anti, the first thing they think is, oh, you're talking about it against me.
Yeah.
Right? And that's not really what we're talking about.
We've got
Yes.
this over here as well.
Oh, Lisa?
I would just like to add that we white folks think we have been really effective at unpacking our own racism and that we have white awareness. But how many of you, or how many of us, I should say, have actually interceded publicly in a moment when you see something racist happen? So I would offer that we can be loving and inclusive in our minds and in our families and at our churches, but in public, how do we provide that ministry? And so these kinds of courageous conversations help us to cross that threshold in naming it when we see it.
Yeah, do you have a question or a comment? Or yes, go ahead.
I love this whole planning structure.
Mhm.
And I would love to know if and would you take this type of a blueprint and use it for other discriminatory?
Absolutely, absolutely.
And have you done other or not?
I haven't done it there, but this model has been taken and used in other communities across New Hampshire,
Yeah.
by the way. But I haven't done it with gender issues or any other kinds of issues. But the blueprint, the architecture of the model would absolutely work.
Are you still part of the diversity?
The Episcopal Church no longer has a diversity committee. We now have a Micah 6 committee. I was part of the diversity committee, morphed into the reconciliation committee because of the nomenclature change. And I was part of that for a number of years. And that recently morphed into the Micah 6 committee. So I'm not on it anymore. I've termed out, as they say. But I was chair of the reparations committee. And so the Episcopal Church has committed to reparations, and we committed money, which is really the big thing. You know, we're putting our money where our mouth is. And that effort, we passed a resolution around it, is being stewarded by the Micah 6 committee.
And do they do other topics as well?
Yes. Yeah, Sean.
So I'm on my.
Yeah, that's right. We have a Micah 6 commissioner right now.
It's a really
Right here.
big priority for us. I mean, among 3 others.
And people can get
but-
involved with that as well?
Yeah.
Yes,
Because
absolutely.
I find that with LGBTQ and women's issues and various things, sometimes I struggle to find blueprints.
Yeah.
You know, what
Actual
books are the
sidewalks.
best kinds of books to use and how can you bring up those difficult conversations
Right.
and help people to come together.
And I think I need to point out that we did this whole series in 3 months. You don't have to do a whole series. You could just do one of these. Right, and I'm gonna, as I said, I'm gonna go into detail about what one of these looked like so you can see it up close and personal. Right, Sean, do you want to say something?
So this is making me think when I think it's around 2010, before I was involved in any of this kind of stuff, so to speak, but in Concord, we became a community where there were a lot of refugees
Right.
living here. And, there was some controversy in some other place in the state. But I remember signing up and attending a 10-week program by the Humanities Council. And it was understanding diversity. I'm not sure that was the word, but understanding new Americans in our community.
I think that's what it was, yes.
And it was really powerful. And like I said, I haven't been to many humanities programs recently.
Yeah.
But that was another resource that brought, and in fact, in the Concord one I was in, it was a professor from the NHTI
Okay,
and the local police chief that co-chaired it. And the professor was a Black woman from, I don't know where, but
Yeah.
she taught at NHTI, she was local.
Yeah.
Could
good.
you repeat that for our online folks?
one?
Summarize what Sean just shared.
So Sean was just sharing that back in 2010 or so, there was a 10-week series program put on by the New Hampshire Humanities Council about how to interact really with new Americans. And that was a time when the new Americans were just really coming into Concord and into New Hampshire as the sanctuary cities. Refugee effort was underway. Yes.
I have, forgive me for being vague, I've heard these, vague, the number of Americans who don't read books or didn't read a book last year.
Right.
And so did you ever find people either misperceive this as a book-centered thing or
No.
that having these pivotal books caused any limitation?
No, because we titled it and really advertised it as conversations.
Okay.
And the books were, once you got into the understanding we're doing conversations, we said, okay, now you're going to come to this event. Here's the book to read. So it was definitely not a book club. It was here's a series of conversations we're going to have. And the books are part of it. Yeah.
Also, for folks where literacy is a challenge, especially when you're partnering with the library, making sure that the audiobook is available on Libby. Having books where there is sort of perhaps even a 10-minute sort of summary to video, so that someone who feels like, well, I couldn't possibly read a 300-page book for whatever reason, still feels like they can enter into the conversation.
Right. Yep. And thanks for mentioning that. Diane did make sure that we had all the books available in audio and in real time. And we did the conversation so that you didn't have to read the book. Right? You didn't have to read the book.
Mm-hmm.
And as I'm going to show you in just a minute, for each of the conversations that we did as the conversations at either the library or the high school, I actually had a video clip that I showed that got across the basic concepts that we then had discussion around.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so here's some photos from that first event at St. Anselm College. This is Debbie over here with two of the St. Anselm students. I think I said we had a little over 300 people at the Dana Center, and this is a picture of some folks in the audience, some folks talking in the lobby afterwards. This is a shot of Robert Aziz doing the Ask a Muslim, which was actually in the basement of St. Lawrence Church, a Catholic church in town. And this was a picture of the Human Library at the Goffstown Library. Two people one was a book, and of course, one was the person who took out the book.
Which they still have.
We still have. We did our fourth
I think so.
annual Human Library this past year. Because it's a big draw. People love it. And it's a way to get people in the community together who wouldn't normally come together. All right, so as I promised, I wanted to get you into an actual conversation. So this is the outline for the conversations we had. We had an introduction, which I did the introduction. We talked about conversational norms, similar to what Reverend Kay talked about, like speaking your truth as you're able. How do we do that?
I statements.
I statements. So some conversational norms that allow us to have civil, respectful conversations. For both people in person and online, we did some of these hybrid, some of them were just in person. So then we had a video which helped to make sure everyone is on the same page and didn't have to read the book necessarily, but you could see the video. And then we had discussion around it. And then we talked about, so what does this mean locally? What are we going to take from this and do locally in Goffstown? And then we wrapped up. So I wanted to actually show you one of the videos that we played.
You may think you know exactly what race you are, but how would you prove it if someone disagreed with you? The fact is, even though race drives a lot of social and political.
I'm going to stop it for a minute, see if I can make it louder for you. Audio. See if I can go back. Okay, and I have to apologize because I forgot to turn on the audio so that the folks remotely could hear that. But I'll send you all the links so you'll have it online. Apologies for that. So what we would do next is what I'm gonna do now.
Can they hear you?
They should be able to hear me because it's just the video that
Okay.
they couldn't hear.
Great.
Yeah, I want to make sure I don't click that again. So what did you think? What struck you from that video? What stood out for you from that video?
What
Yes.
stood out for me was the sickle cell anemia.
Yes. The other factors,
Yeah, that they kind of lump all those things in the word race.
word race, right? What else? Yes.
We're changing from state to state.
Changing from state to state.
Going back and forth depending on the need of the country.
And so the need of the country. So there's a key concept, the need of the country. And who runs the country? What else stood out for you? Anything else?
Fact that it was only the year 2000 when more than one race or whatever the term was that just feels like just yesterday, you know.
Feels like it was
More recent
2000,
than we
was just
realized.
yesterday,
Yeah.
right? And think of how people had to choose how they would respond to that before then. Yeah, John.
Just imagine like, when will it just not be worth it? Census to us, the question seems to be so.
And that is, did you hear that question that Sean just asked? That is a very key question we are grappling with right now. When do we stop basically violating the Civil Rights Act by trying to make up for the fact that we violated the Civil Rights Act?
Can you speak to the trickiness of not asking that question? Because
Sure,
until
yeah.
the most recent administration, the data that comes from the census actually helps to inform
All sorts of decisions, as this
all
video
sorts
said.
of decisions.
How much money a district gets depends on the racial demographics of that region, at least until this recent administration it has.
Maybe
That's kind of changed.
just
There, I'm not gonna,
It works.
don't get me started. Let's keep concentrating on the conversation. Anything else stand out for you from that video? It was a bit to digest, right? So we gave people the link so they could go back and look at it again and share it with people in their community. Right? So the last thing we talk about is, so what does this mean for our community? How are we going to take what we've just encountered and learned into the community? What are we going to do with this new information we've learned? Share it on Facebook. What would you do in your community?
I share it with my friends.
Share with your friends.
Well, that- I know my family.
Yeah.
I
Contact,
specifically took it because I specifically came here to talk to my family because I have a very modern family.
Ah, yes.
I think contacting your representatives to
Yeah.
Good.
really kind of communicate of, hey, this is an issue. I mean, talking about the not asking, I worked for a while in community mental health, and some of the questions that you had to get was your gender, how you identified, and some of our questions were like, where is this information going?
Yeah.
Why do we have to?
Who is this for?
There are a lot of people of color who will not fill out that information because they don't want that information going into some place where it can be used against them. Yes, please.
I know people when asked for race, they write in human.
Yeah. Human race. Yep. All right. Oh, yeah.
One more thing. So we're here in a house of worship,
Yes.
but that doesn't mean that everyone in our faith community is like mine.
That is correct.
So this kind of
Correct.
discussion
It'd be weird if they were.
would be great as a faith and action topic. But you also don't want to scare people away who are active members of your church. How do we navigate? How have you navigated?
What we say, and this is kind of a lead into, well, we got some other on discussion, but I'll just address this really quickly, is you say that we want to have a conversation. You don't say much more than that. We just want to have a conversation. Because the more you say, the more people will nitpick on it. All right, so we actually had some kind of questions. I came up with the questions for each of the quadrants of, and this is the labyrinth of the Becoming Beloved Community long-term commitment. So some of the questions we planted were, when did you first notice your race? Always get interesting responses. Some people didn't until they started working. Some people didn't until they had a roommate in college. Some people learned about it very early in life. Right? How does race impact your life or work? Have you observed how race impacts your life? Have you thought about it? How does it impact your work? How is it touched by your work? How does it touch your work? For proclaiming the dream, for what areas of our society do we want or need to infuse these ideas like color braveness and creating a vision? And that notion of color braveness is something we defined in the Proclaiming the Dream session. There's a great video from Melanie Hobson. It used to be that we strove to be colorblind. Heard that term color blindness before? Which for the time was great, but now we've come to a point where it's not so great. Anybody know why? Yes.
If you don't see color, you're not really seeing the whole person.
Fairness and equity are not the same thing.
Fairness and equity are not the same thing. It's one thing. I have a nice little cartoon I use to explain the difference between fairness and equity. And it's the three U's at different heights, trying to see over a fence to see a ball game, right? So that notion that equality and equity are not the same is a huge revelation to some people, right? For practicing the way of love, we ask that racism causes trauma for the aggressor or the harm doer, as they're referred to, and for the victim. How do you deal with trauma? How do you deal with trauma? Do you recognize that you are traumatized by racism, even if you are not overtly oppressed by it? Right? What in our culture needs changing so kids don't attempt lynching? One of the things I did not show you earlier on was in Claremont, New Hampshire, in 2018, a kid tried to lynch another kid. So for the repairing the breach, what local institutions, laws, or systems need to be examined? Have you looked at your town's statutes with an equity lens? That might be a little project to do. Project for a Boy Scout troop or a Girl Scout troop. Project for a youth group. And who needs to be involved in the change? We've already kind of talked about that, right? Who needs to be involved in the change? Everybody. So these are the kinds of questions we posed during the discussion time after the video. Give you a real good feel for what we did. Right. All right, so timelines. We spent from March of 2018 to October just planning. Just lining up Debbie Irving, lining up all the locations, meeting with the partners, trying to get those partners lined up, getting funding. We got funding from the diocese, we got funding from St. Anselm, we got funding from the humanities. Well, actually, we tried to get funding from the humanities and they didn't, but they later actually changed their rules because they realized that they should have given us funding, but they didn't. And then we did the implementation from December. Really, January is when we had the event with Debbie Irving, through March. And then we did some follow-up events after the actual program happened. So as I said before, though, you don't have to do all of these, just do one. Start off with one. Yes.
How many people were involved
Oh,
in
you're,
this?
that's a lessons learned slide. So I'll get to that.
You jumped to slide.
Oh, I know I jumped a slide because I thought this next slide would have the number that I wanted, but it doesn't. So I'll go back. We had over 500 people engaged throughout the 3-month period.
No, I mean, how many people were involved in the plan?
Oh, the planning.
Yes.
6 of us were
Okay.
involved in the planning.
So various tasks were.
We
divvied up.
assigned various tasks. Yes. And I was the project manager because I'm a licensed project management professional.
Occupational hazard.
Occupational hazard, yeah. Yeah, you're the PMP, you get to lead this. Kind of was my bright idea anyway, so I figured I had to lead it. So that's why I talk about how is this managed? There was a revenue piece, an expenses piece. We had bi-weekly meetings, planning meetings to make sure we were ready for it until we actually kicked it off. And then we had meetings every month to just kind of make sure we were in sync. We sent out invitations, actual paper invitations and email invitations to community leaders and through community channels as best we could, so that people would have an awareness of what we were doing. And we sent them out for every event. Not just at the beginning, but for every event, we'd send something out. I mentioned we had the website, we had a registration system for the event, so we knew how many people were coming. We coordinated with the speakers, reserved the event locations, ordered food. For some of the events, we actually had food, which pizza's here, who needs to eat more? And we did evaluations after every program to try to learn from
I have a
that.
question. So even though all the events were not at the library, the
Correct.
library managed the website?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, yes. The website was the one central place where everyone could go to see what's the program this month, what's what. We didn't want to have people going from different web pages. Now, some of the organizations had these events on their web page, but it was only the events that they were hosting that was on their web page. The master schedule was on the library website.
And the registration.
And the registration for the events were on the library website.
How did people find it on the library website? Like, was it on their homepage?
It was on the homepage. It was absolutely on the homepage. We even had little banners. The Goffstown Library has news banners on the homepage, and so we made part of the news banner. Yeah, somebody back there, yeah.
Duplicate any of these at different times to capture different people?
No, we did not. That was a bridge a little too far. We did not even record them, because one of the things we know about recording is people don't talk. And we wanted to make it a very open and free space, safe space. Actually, I use the term that Dr. Eric Law from the Kaleidoscope Institute uses, gracious space, which is even beyond a brave space, right? Where we're holding everybody up in love and we recognize that we're humans, we're gonna make mistakes. That's got to be okay. Because if we don't make mistakes, we don't learn. We have to be vulnerable to learn.
Do you think any of that would be different in terms of recording post-pandemic period where people are kind of used to having things
No.
recorded?
No. That has not changed.
If anything, it's worth, so we talked a little bit in going through the structure of the conversation. We talked about in-person norms and online norms. If you're going to,
Yeah, that's. There you go.
so if
You're
you're
on.
going to be having these conversations online, people are oftentimes willing to say things online that they're not willing to say in person. So making it as much of a in-person online space as we can. So having, if people are going to share, having sort of a camera requirement for you as having designated moderators in the chat, for you being very aware of your plethora of tools on Zoom for mute all, for blocking someone from the chat, giving yourself the time and the space to really become acquainted with all of your digital options, because those are so important. Because the same way, for us to have a conversation here in person, we set the stage with 8 top tables and pizza and, accessible parking, giving just as much thought to how to create those gracious spaces in digital space. Also, make sure that you require registration for all of your online events. Do not just post a link and have people click and enter into the conversation. You want to require advanced registration and have a waiting room.
And that comes from the COVID time when people would actually, we call dive bomb the online events. All right, so results. We did see from our evaluations increased awareness of the issue. We had SAU employees, school district employees who were involved, and they all got the 4 books upon which we based the series. And I actually did training for the Goffstown High School staff. Right. The GHS Equity Committee developed a belonging plan as a result of our efforts. There were books on the Goffstown School summer reading list about racism that were, of course, age appropriate, but that happened because of our program. And this did have over 500 people were reached during the 3-month period. So some lessons we learned, partnerships are critical. Critical because no one organization can do this alone. People were actually willing to address the issue. That was something we learned because it got 500 people involved. People wanted to have the discussions. We got no complaints, 0 complaints. We were astonished. We thought for sure we'll get some complaints. We got 0 complaints during the program. We had participants who were from different generations. That was so valuable because my perspective as a 64-year-old who marched with Dr. King is very different than a 30-year-old who wasn't around during the civil rights era.
I'm 36. Come on, James.
Okay, 36. Oh, you're just an old fogey now.
Yeah.
So that intergenerational nature is something to really strive for. This is where you can get youth groups involved, right? Food is always a draw. And along with that, do we have that here? We even talked about babysitting. And for a few events, we actually did offer babysitting because we recognized that some of the events were happening at dinner time or shortly thereafter, and we got parents, and we wanted to get parents more involved as we could.
And parents, especially young parents, are so often looking for how can I have these conversations?
Yes, yes.
And really having a space where you can model doing this work together.
Yeah. And there is never enough time to finish the conversation. It's always, this is the start of the conversation. Let's have another one to continue it. And we really also put all of this in the context of how do we make our community more welcoming? That's the framing. Not that this is a book club, not that we're going to have conversations about race. It's how do we make our community more welcoming for everybody? So some next steps after the event, we decided we're going to do see if we could get some more partners and do some more planning, which we did. We are still having courageous conversations. Not as many as the series, but every quarter or so, we're having another conversation. And those right after our series, we did a One Goffstown series of courageous conversations to try to keep the conversations going. I think that's actually. So this is the pamphlet that we had that came out afterwards that showed the Human Library and the One Goffstown series. We had an event on cyberbullying to follow up. So that is what I've got. Questions? Go back a few slides here.
While you're doing that, as someone who moved to Goffstown in 2021, after all of these conversations had happened, you could feel that the conversations had happened, which I think is such a testament to your work, James, and the work of the whole committee, and the ways that even if they're not directly tied to your original planning team, the way that events and conversations are continuing to happen in Goffstown because you all created this framework has really been incredible to be part of.
Great, great.
What exactly did you notice is different afterwards?
That it is a community that is already willing to have tough conversations. You know, for example, in the last year, there have been some incidences of anti-LGBT violence and certainly anti-LGBT rhetoric in Goffstown. And those leaders, the library, Crispin House, the schools, they were all already equipped to enter into conversations where they knew there was going to be conflict, but they were willing to be there anyway. That framework has helped in any number of challenges in the community.
And it was not without some pushback from those leaders in the early days. Yes.
When you had the 300 plus people, how did you orchestrate conversations with that many people?
So the conversations that program was not designed like the little mini program that I mentioned.
Okay.
That program was Debbie Irving spoke, a couple of us who were, because it was the kickoff of the program. So I spoke and a couple other folks spoke and laid out what we were going to do for the next 3 months. And there were conversations in the lobby afterward. They were not facilitated by us, but there's a lot of conversation just from the people who were attending in the lobby afterwards. We did during that program, I did allow time for people from the audience to ask questions. So that was a sort of a mini, I suppose you could say, conversation with Debbie Irving, because that was their opportunity to ask her questions and interact.
But also a great pitch for, you know, we've started like you've said, we've started this conversation, the conversation continues, and really modeling that.
Right. Yeah, Sean?
Yeah, I was just thinking, you know, some other communities, you know, there's the One Book Community Reads program. Yeah. And has that ever been a vehicle for something like this?
I don't know about the One Books, but a number of communities took this model and ran with it. Mm-hmm. They implemented it. Yes.
I would imagine that not every single person went to every single event.
That is correct.
But I would imagine that you had kind of numbers from each event that you could kind of correlate.
Yes, a little bit.
To some degree. Were some of these just drop in, or did you have to register for each thing?
These were all registered.
Okay.
Well, were they all? They were not all registration. The actual facilitated conversations, they were all registered. The Debbie Irving event was registered, but and the Robert Aziz was a register, but the Culturally Curious that was at the library, that was not a register. So there are a few things that were happening that were part of the library's programming that were not for registration.
I say that only because I would think even if you got one person to go to one of those things and nothing else, it's still awesome.
Right, and so we,
I mean,
and
it
we,
still probably was very enlightening
yes,
and
yes,
maybe opened a few minds
yeah,
and maybe spurred them on to do it again. So
Right.
I just think it's so huge, but it's so amazing that you offered all of those things. I would have known.
well, now you know,
Now,
yes, absolutely.
Any possibility of doing something like this with the current events that are going on now?
I don't
I
see
know
that.
racism in any diversity is ongoing and it still needs to work. But we're in such a place right now in our country where we're also divided and information is up for grabs. You know, it's this side or that side, depending on who you listen to.
Yeah.
There
Yes. There are a few happening, but you all, this is for you all to be creating your own, right?
Well, we need the help.
Well, so one of the things, and this is why, you know, the last slide is contact information for us, and Lisa knows how to get to us. We're here to help you put on these conversations. We're not just gonna drop this, get this information on you and send you on your way and say, okay, we're done. No, we're here to help you create these conversations in your local communities.
And this is just the first of a series of events through the New Hampshire Council of Churches. So the sort of formation for you all as leaders in your community continues, and that you all took time on a Thursday night to come, you know, you all are already engaged in this work.
Right.
You wouldn't have come to this meeting if you weren't. But as many tools as we can give you so that you feel empowered to bring this back to your own towns.
And I'll also say that, you know, this same presentation that I gave you tonight, I've given to the New Hampshire Library Association three times. So all the librarians, if they've been around for a few years, have seen this. So if you go to them and say you want to do a courageous conversations like happened in Goffstown, they'll probably know about it. Somebody, Sean.
Well, I was just gonna say, I didn't know about all of this program, but you know, when you were hired to come to Keene.
Yes.
And help us with
Yes.
this stuff, and he was like, you know, I mean, we got a receptive parts of the community.
Yeah.
But still, now I realize all this experience that you were bringing behind you. And that's that DIB coalition is still going strong.
Yes, good. Yep.
I want to talk about one of the big issues that's causing a lot of division, to kind of address what you were saying earlier, is digital spaces. Have you started bridging into the digital spaces? Because that's something that I talk a lot about in my classroom, and we talk about digital well-being and digital citizenship. And that's something I feel really comfortable talking about as a young person, but I know a lot of people don't feel as comfortable on like the TikToks and the Instagrams, Snapchats.
Yeah. So, you know, the average age of a church attendee in the Episcopal Church is 64.
My age.
Where
I'm average, yeah.
And that is generally your Facebook crowd. You know, sort of the early Gen X to boomers tends to be the more Facebook crew. Younger than that, you get into Instagram. Typically Gen Z, younger, with the occasional millennial on TikTok. Apps are constantly evolving. This will change in 5 minutes. This has already changed in the last 6 months with the sale of TikTok. It's all very complicated.
Sky and.
Yeah. All of these conversations are happening differently depending on the platform. I don't need to tell you. Because each platform has a different emphasis. Apps like TikTok and Instagram are very video focused, whereas apps like Facebook, Blue Sky tend to be much more focused on text. With all of these conversations, the internet is human community. It is the best of us and the worst of us. And ultimately, we decide what our social digital spaces are going to be and how we are going to treat each other. and that sort of digital familiarity in shaping these conversations require a certain amount of sort of boundary setting, and I love that gracious space creation. So for example, I have a church community for disabled and chronically ill people on TikTok. On one level, that is a nightmare. Because, you know, all of the most ableist troll garbage
Is there.
is there.
Yeah.
People feel very empowered without, you know, being face to face to say whatever they're going to say. But that means that I have 2 moderators for every service who are in charge of the chat and who are able to block. It means that I have a comment filter on all of my posts so that particular ableist words, if they show up in a comment, that comment will be screened. Really becoming familiar with what sorts of tools are available on each digital platform so that we can have these conversations people to further trauma, especially people who are already on the margins.
Yeah, I mean, also, how can we use social media as a tool to invite people we wouldn't otherwise encounter in our day-to-day lives? How can we use that as a tool for connection? Instead of like the human garbage scum of the internet that's so often out there.
With that, I think the best thing we can do, I said in my intro, the most powerful tool we have is our own story. And I think that is especially true in digital spaces. Because we, as folks who have existed on the social internet for 36 years now, that is how long the social internet has existed. We're the same age. We have pretty good BS filters. Like, we know when we're sort of being, hopefully, usually, we know when we're kind of being pandered to. But especially with things like difficult conversations, being open and willing to be sort of vulnerable about like, hey, I am working on like recognizing my own whiteness. I'm reading this book. These are the things that I'm learning from it. It's really interesting. Like, I would love to have a conversation partner. Is anyone willing to join me in this, you know, in reading this book? Like, just beyond just reposting articles that you find compelling, because the algorithm is going to bury that. And 2, like, you know, it just becomes sort of an echo chamber of it's like, well, I agree with this, repost. Say why it's compelling to you. What about it speaks to your experience? What have you learned? Because the more personal you can be and transparent you can be about your own learning journey and your work to love your neighbors more fully, the more you invite other people into that work.
And that's leading by example, right? It's not a take someone down post. It's let's help the community and start with me, learn and grow. Yes.
So when we started, Reverend Kate gave us the basis for this, which, you know, for I think everybody here is, you know, our religion. And I wondered how you formatted that aspect when you began the conversations. Did religion play a part of that?
Somebody said.
Becoming beloved community is the Episcopal Church's long-term commitment based on theological principles. Each of these 4 areas has theology as its grounding.
Okay. And so other people in the community that attended these, that wasn't a problem?
It's not a problem.
Okay.
And so I guess the other thing is, it was probably not a problem because we didn't throw the theology in their face.
Okay.
We didn't say Ephesians and give a number is the basis for this conversation.
My Bible quotes.
For this group, it works. For the community,
Yeah. And that's
we're a state of none. So we all know what that means.
You know, the whole part about respectful listening and all of that.
Oh, right.
was based, in the way you started.
Mhm.
And I didn't know how you then framed it when you started the conversation.
But the conversational norms,
Yeah, okay.
didn't throw theology at people, but I statements, no judgment,
Okay.
respectful listening, gracious space. Everyone's a teacher, everyone's a learner.
I agree, but the beginning slide was.
Absolutely. And it really depends on, again,
Yeah.
context.
Right.
The conversation that you have in the parish hall at St. Paul's is going to be different than the one that you have at the public school.
Right.
And depending on what group you are gathering, you can have a more community-based conversation and also one for your particular faith community. Sometimes I think it's great to be able to have those initially in your faith community. So
Right.
that way you have more leaders who feel comfortable going out into the community and, being those facilitators.
And that brings up, I'll get to in a minute, but that brings up the point that we in the Episcopal Church are really focused on these days is, and our bishop has been really good about and consistent about saying this, we need to be outside of the four walls. We need to be planning inside the four walls about how we're going to go outside of the four walls and create beloved community. Yeah.
I think the other thing is starting from points of connection, like everyone can agree that telling the truth is important. Everyone can agree that protecting children is important. Everyone can agree that there are some things that are inherently wrong with the structure of our country. But how we want to fix them is different. So where can we find common ground in the roots of the problem?
And that takes, not to toot my own horn, but that takes facilitation.
Yeah.
That takes someone who can be disciplined and say, we're going to first hear each other's stories. And this comes from giving you, actually, I'm going to do this. I did this talk last night for the OSHA lifelong learning group on how to have difficult conversations. And it starts with hearing each other's stories, St. Francis's prayer, seek to understand before you seek to be understood. Once you've heard each other's story and you've proven that each other knows each other's story, right? And doing that first allows the barriers to go down. Then you find common ground. Now that we know each other's stories, where's the overlap? Let's agree on that. Now, how are we going to move forward together? Right? You're both sides are now open because you understand each other. How are we going to move forward together? Yeah.
So did this process surface hopeful stories in the history of Goffstown that you had never, that were new to you?
Absolutely. So interestingly enough, about the same time, we started working with the New Hampshire Black History Trail. And we worked with them to actually teach people in their parishes how to do a historical research to find the histories, because people don't know how to do a historical research, but they have expertise in it. So we partnered, the Episcopal Church Diocese partnered with them to have these training sessions of how do you do that history research. And we definitely found, I know in Goffstown, we found there was a grave of an African-American, and we have a couple cemeteries, but the big one, that's the main one in town, we found that there was actually a grave area of an African-American family that most of us never knew was there.
Lisa.
Lisa.
I just wanted to.
With time, right?
Yeah, we're getting close to winding down. I wanted to just to the question of, can we talk about our faith in these courageous conversations, or can we lead with that? And as Reverend Kate said, we do have to look at the context. However, I would plant this seed for you to reflect on. The 7 sort of progressive mainline denominations that is the Association of the New Hampshire Council of Churches, has gotten pretty, inexperienced at small e evangelizing. And as a result of not taking what you all call, or what we all call, the good news out into the public square, we have left a giant amount of the airwaves open to the ideology of Christian nationalism. And so our progressive secular friends have been beat over the head with a construct of the ministry of Jesus Christ that is not accurate. So I would encourage you all to consider, how do you just slip this simple sentence in, I do this because my faith calls me to. And then maybe someone will be curious and say, whoa, tell me about that. And then that's another way to spread the good news.
Oh my gosh, you're calling up for me. Did anybody watch West Wing, The West Wing? Did you see that episode where this doctor of English visited the White House, and when the president walked in, everybody stood up except for her? And he gave her the best dressing down that you would ever see. And he asked questions like, I know my Bible chapter and verse. So if the Washington Redskins play football with a football, which is, of course, made with the skin of a pig, do we have to kill them?
That's been on commercials, I think,
It's been a couple, right? So he goes after, he quotes Bible chapter and verse to her, asking her, so given our modern society, how are we supposed to deal with this? And she just sits there because she can't answer. Right? So knowing enough about the Bible, what it says, how it needs to be translated or addressed in today's society is very helpful. All right, so.
All right, so.
We got one more question?
I was wondering if the link to the video and on the slideshow, if that's something that can be emailed to us?
Yes, I will get you
So
the data.
we're gonna get everyone a PDF of the slides.
Yes,
yeah?
yes,
Great.
yes.
So that will happen.
Oh, got one more.
Oh, sure.
Just, speaking for myself, this feels a bit overwhelming or daunting to try to put on.
Yeah.
And the reason that I'm here is because Kate S. ran, it was a conversation about a book for 6 weeks that a number of us here went to. I just was maybe a quick show of hands, whether or not people would be interested in experiencing a review of a book like that before we attempted to do something much larger. Yes, hands? Anybody put their hand in here?
So I mean, it's a book event, book review event. That's one event.
It's a book review event, but this group, there's some, camaraderie, community within this.
Book and get people to sign up.
Or what, after this, I'm sure we have everybody's email, but.
We can send it around.
I just was curious if people would be interested in trying to do something like that, and I don't know how far and wide people have come from.
What book are you talking about? What's the book called?
Well, maybe there's one in here that we could do, but the book that we used was The Color of Compromise, which is when you go through it, and it has a lot of the things that you're talking about. It has a video series that goes with it, so. But it's eye-opening for many people. It's eye-opening for many people from the north who had no idea what really went on and what our history is. And it kind of speaks to one of the things there, which is to just get a baseline and to understand the roots of things.
Yeah. Okay. Lisa has
I am not going to share everyone's name and email address in a document. There would be too many people who would not like that.
All right, so I will, if anybody's interested, I won't move, and then you can come see
Well,
me.
but the other thing you can do is if you send her a blurb, if you send Lisa a blurb, she can send it out to everybody else
Yeah.
with your contact information. That way, you don't have to.
Or either way.
Or I have some, first, a round of applause. I have some commercials about additional events. You can find these all on the New Hampshire Council of Churches Facebook page, so you don't have to memorize it all. On March 21st, we are having a joyful noise music event, Songs for Belonging, Justice, and Community. On March 28th, Reverend Heidi Carrington Heath and I are doing a program entitled Unmasking Christian Nationalism. Its impacts on two areas, government and family, and there will be other areas covered in two follow-up conversations later on. So again, unmasking Christian nationalism, impacts on government and family on March 28th, and that is strictly online.
What time is that?
6 to 8.
Okay. Oh, great.
6 to 8. On April 11th, there is a team of us who got together because a couple of volunteers reached out to a number of organizations and said, we want to run this racial reconciliation program called A Long Talk, and that's happening on April 11th. And if you go to the Unitarian Universalist Action Network Facebook page, you can take that program. That's coming up. It's both, it's in person. So there are more events on these types of topics around building beloved community and gaining tools on what to do when you bump up against stuff that's unpleasant and ugly. The third Wednesday of the month is when we have our Countering Christian Nationalism online meetings. We are super grateful that you have come out tonight to be with us in this sacred space. And we hope that you will leave curious and brave and take this home and try to plant some of your own seeds. Thank you.
Thank you.
And take pizza.
Take pizza. Take the salad's pretty much done. Take some cookies too.
Mention that legislation, but I can put that in his mouth. I had extra. I saw the March 24th, and I'm like, we'll put it on. My mom. Well.
There's too many events.
Do you attend St. Matthew's now? I was wondering, do you go to that?
She was very good.
That's kind of like all I have my seats for.
Yeah, and then I bet James.
Exactly. You really remind myself that.
We got like.
Sunday doesn't mean a concert.
Yeah, that's right.
Great to see you,
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
It's really, really helpful. Done a number of public dialogues on immigration, but never on racial reconciliation. So it's very helpful to hear.
They are intertwined.
It's, yeah, and it's great work. So thank you.
Well, thank you for doing the work you're doing.
And with the race again. What? You know?
It is. The Hunger Games. I mean, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
All that state's flag. Oh.
It was.
I heard a whole thing on that and I think it was depressed for the rest of the day.
Yeah, I mean, confronting the realities is just
Yes.
difficult. There's a reason that.
I don't know.
I recognize you here now.
By myself, it is so easy to fall.
I still, I was looking at.
Unity, it's like.
No, we're going to-
Yeah.
I all came up with that.
I said, if you guys not borrowing. This is the third coffee.
Esther's.
My eye bar. Mine.
I don't wanna sit like, I don't wanna have a conversation where it's like, you're over here and I'm over there. You guys are blah, 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 blah. So that's what I would hear, or that may even be what I say.
But it's.
But my.
I just said that.
You're always.
Yeah.
Have
a conversation, Yeah, so going back to that whole structure that was, you mentioned at the very beginning.
You know, once.
Yeah, it's on a bridge by now, and I feel like there's so much of that right now. The tenor of our country. Yeah.
Values.
Yeah. And just keep coming back to, my faith is needing to try and understand, try and whatever. Yes, yeah. Exactly.
I just wanted as a follow-up.
And if you're on the list, you'll get this.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate this. I believe I did the first one many years ago, but I hadn't heard of these other ones. So.
Great books. This one is more of a systematic look at. Just look at this one,
I'm trying way too much to get.
These two are really valuable. This one. Both of them.
So, in your opinion, like, has the long-term effect of these conversations been that cost on time?
Yes. We did this. Tried to be interdenominational as well. So the Baptist Church and the there's another denomination that wouldn't have anything to do with it.
Certainly.
Right.
Yeah.
Because that's typically their way anyway. God's chosen people in the world.
Some of the good is.
But even some of theirs have been in
conversations.
conversations with the same thing. And they've been, we've done it with a lot of other faith aspects.
That's always.
It's really hard in our church to partner with the other churches in our town. So Bedford,
Oh,
like,
well, yeah, that's right.
we try, but like, when we start, like, when our church starts, and then we want to get like the other churches involved. They wouldn't get involved unless they could do that.
It's those denominations, because that's the way that their denominations are. They have to be in control, and if you're not one of us, then you're not one of us.
Yeah, so we haven't been able, like, it's become a running joke that, you know, our church can't seem to play nice with the other church.
Okay, yeah.
Like, we're finally, I think we're trying to partnership with St. Elizabeth Seton.
Okay.
Okay, so that's a start, because it's a big church in town. I don't know.
To which church?
So,
Oh, the dairy.
you know,
You just have to keep asking.
yeah.
And make it about, how do we make Bedford?
That's actually, I really liked how you said that, like, that is what your goal.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. State the aspirational goal.
Right in my backyard.
And say, let's have a conversation.
Oh.
Yeah, Bedford's my wife grew up in Bedford. It's a really interesting place.
It is a very.
It's right next door, so.
Yes, it is. And we go to Goffstown, like, we go to Goffstown Y. And then because my daughter was on the gymnastics team, I kept going to like a Goffstown Town Day.
Yeah.
A regatta thing.
Because they were marching and.
Yeah. You know, her sister's like,
That's where I work.
I mean, like, how come Goffstown does one of these festivals where people can just hang out together?
Well, we have a town square also that kind of Bedford just doesn't. It's got the.
But I do have a
Which is
sure that.
behind the library, that space that got built a few years ago.
Yeah,
But that's not really a town square. The boys pass it.
They're not immune.
right.
And Bedford traditionally is, how long you been there?
2008.
A little bit.
You know, but it's, I mean, definitely not
That man's books.
time. So you gotta,
It's not really a community town.
Just.
Bedford.
when we first moved there, people were at the nerve already. It's very command.
Felt very. I did not know that.
For years.
How long? And that feels like a weird thing.
Maybe this approach of like, let's have a conversation, you know, make it a bit more.
My experience,
Invite in.
So.
the things. Race.
We said that,
Well, so there's a book.
That makes
about
it,
this.
yes,
Isabel Wilkerson's class, a cast.
yeah.
She talks about it is, and the expert will debate as to whether it's race or whether it's class.
That's
A
right.
huge amount of it is in fact class.
Yeah.
It
But
is.
there's a racial tinge on top of that, which makes it.
Yeah,
Right.
but the thing is, like, when I read this book, I felt like a lot of her experience or not being awakened had a lot to do with her class.
Yes, yes, it did,
They were-
because they were upper class, yes.
And
Yes,
so she was very much her, like she's describing her whole childhood, and I was laughing. I thought, well, I mean, their stuff is just something that's unknown, like, to our family before we moved to Bedford.
Bedford is known on being class.
yes.
It is.
His.
I met this,
Just by.
I was at a fair, we trapped there and I met, you know, and I said, God, you guys are beautiful. This is really great. You're really good at that. I said, are you from New Hampshire? And she said, yeah. She said, I should have done this. She said, I live in Bedford. I said, oh, that's.
Yeah, it's actually. Life is.
I kind of under my breath, but she heard it.
Okay.
And she said, but I'm from New York. And I said, you just redeemed yourself. But really, I'm serious about that.
Year was.
Well, of course, it becomes evident every time there's debate about another multi-unit dwelling.
Oh.
I mean, I thought that
That
was
is
such a
being
powerful
proposed somewhere in
thing.
town.
And it's.
We did a river pilgrimage with.
I was the personal chef.
Native community.
And I cooked for several people in Bedford.
Oh, yeah.